Basic Brewing Radio is sponsored in part by the American Homebrewers Association. Saturday, August 6th is Mead Day. See what the buzz is all about and celebrate this sweet homebrew holiday. Now through August 8th, the American Homebrewers Association is offering listeners $5 off an annual membership with promo code MEADDAY22. Visit homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing to download a variety of mead recipes, find a homebrew supply shop, and dust off your mead-making skills with how-to videos. That's homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing to get $5 off for Mead Day when you join or renew by August 8th, 2022. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, July 28th, 2022. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Matt Jannett from Fenn Valley Vineyards joins us to share his experience judging ciders. Matt also talks about his experience as a winemaker in Fennville, Michigan. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. If you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewers' logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Financial supporters will get to see an early release this week of our video episode featuring my Kvike Galaxy Maris Otter IPA that I fermented on my hot patio a couple weeks ago. It was done in a hurry, and it's delicious. Steve and I sampled the beer from the keg a week after I brewed the beer, just a week. And I pitched the Kvike at around 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius around that area, and it fermented very well. I continue to be amazed at how happy Kvike is at such high temperatures and how it ferments so quickly and cleanly. I also started a very small batch of jalapenos fermenting in a vacuum-sealed bag, appropriate of nothing, just some peppers, a little garlic, and some salt. And we have a lot of jalapenos in our jalapeno plant this year. Habaneros are starting to wake up, and our poblano plant is finally showing some signs of productivity. It's all thanks to Susan for watering them every morning. For sure, they would be crispy critters in the heat and dry without her intervention. We're expected to get some rain later this week, so maybe that'll help things out a little bit. Hey, I got a note from our friend Greg McGill down at Brewocracy down in New Zealand. He says he wants to get in touch with Ken Kazmersky, the brewer of the Chicago hot dog beer from our Club Night episode. Greg's coming up to the Chicago area next year and wants to meet up with Ken and taste that beer and maybe trade for some of his Brewocracy beers from New Zealand. I searched and I couldn't find contact information for Ken, so Ken, if you're listening, get in touch with me. Send me an email at james@basicbrewing.com. Or if you know Ken, please tell him that I'm looking to get in touch. Greg wants to try that Chicago hot dog beer. It was delicious. It'd be fun to be a fly on the wall in that conversation or on the bar. I got an email from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from HighGravityBrew.com. In it, they have some suggestions for beer ingredient kits of theirs for your next summertime brew. How about The Extraordinary Adventures of Ordinary Bitter? This is a deliciously balanced English-style session beer that would be a great thirst quencher on these hot summer days. Desiree Cream Ale is a kit inspired by Genesee Cream Ale. Grainy sweetness with a hint of fruitiness and pronounced dryness. Very refreshing sounding. And Summer Blonde, a kit with citrusy Cascade hops and lemon peel. Man, all of those sound delicious. And of course, if you have your own recipe, you can use the extremely handy Build Your Own Beer page on HighGravityBrew.com. We can find all the inventory of a very well-stocked homebrew shop on one page, and your running total is always visible at the bottom of the page. And, of course, there's the Warthog family of electric brewing products to see there, too. That's all at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. Okay, Matt Jannett was on the show way back a long time ago when he was just a youngster. And I was really happy to hear from him again, and I enjoyed hearing about his life as a winemaker and about his experiences judging ciders. Matt Jannett, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Well, it's great to be back.
Now, you, fans of the archives, might remember your name in connection with beer cheese from way back in 2014. And back then, you were just a college student. When we talked about beer cheese. But what have you been up to in the ensuing 8 years?
Oh yeah. Since then, I've gone on to enter the wine industry as a career path of mine. Started off by going out to California doing a harvest internship at E&J Gallo Winery in Modesto, California, and then kind of made my way back to the Midwest. Did some little wine sales, and then got into working for B Nectar in Ferndale, Michigan, doing hard cider and mead there for a couple months, and then I interviewed and took a assistant winemaker position at my current workplace called Fenn Valley Vineyards in Southwest Michigan, specifically the town of Fennville, Michigan, about 3 hours outside of Chicago, right along the lake shore. And I've since been here about 6 years now, and I've worked up becoming the head winemaker. So
wow. So what kinds of things are you making?
Oh God, a lot of things. My company's been around for almost 50 years now, and the model always was, if you're to come visit us, better have something that you liked, to at least drink or consume. So we have like 40, 45 different SKUs.
Wow.
Doing, our main focus is, Michigan, if not Southwest Michigan or the Fennville area, grape wines, anything from dry whites to sweet whites to dry reds, typical Bordeaux varieties, and hybrids and all these different things. But we also dwell in fruit fermentations, hard cider being a big thing in Michigan. And then also we ferment cherries and blueberries as well, and do a variety of different products.
Oh. So. And I take it with all those different varieties, you're not growing all of that by yourselves.
Yeah, true. We only grow on our property ourselves. We only grow grapes for our use. We do have a few other growers, and a little farther south from us that also grow grapes for us. And then in terms of cherries and blueberries and apples, we source from Michigan as well. Kind of in general vicinity to us, Southwest Michigan or up in the Traverse City area. But yeah, our thing is, Michigan fruit. It's kind of the big. I think all the wineries in Michigan are all focusing on kind of local fruit. I think that's the big movement, is local is best, and trying to show what we can really produce in our state.
And compared to beer brewing, is it, compare and contrast, in which ways is it more challenging, and in which ways is it less?
Well, it's quite a, fundamentally it's pretty much the same. You're fermenting sugars into alcohol and CO2. But in terms of where those sugars come from is really the big difference. I like to say that I have the easiest job in the world, where Mother Nature does 90% of my work for me. I only have to do 10%, and that 10% is just not screwing it up. But with that, there's a lot of challenges, with Mother Nature. Some years you have cold weather, some years you have hot weather, some years you have really wet weather, some years you have really dry weather. And that just, it really fluctuates, in our area, just kind of depending on, what Mother Nature wants to do. And, we've had some pretty rough years since I've been here. We've had, negative 30 degrees, which likes to kill a lot of vineyards. But, in terms of really kind of going back to the question, is in terms of beer brewing and, kind of in between like winemaking or really cider making, is that, we don't have necessarily the flexibility in choosing exactly how we want things to turn out. We can always have this general idea of like what's going to happen, but Mother Nature does throw some tricks in plays, and really how we make our products is by taking different aspects of different fruit varietals or qualities, put them together to make a final product. While as brewing, you're able to I want to make a stout, so I'm going to buy, dark roasted malts, and chocolate malts, or I'm going to make an IPA and have hops and different grains and stuff like that in reality. And then fruit, we're just kind of, we have the fruit, we try to decide, how we're going to use that into our final product. Um, yeah.
Yeah, in our previous house we lived in, eons ago, we had 4 or 5 little apple trees in our backyard, and of the 5 years that we lived there, we only had a good set of fruit like once, because there was always, the trees would flower out and look beautiful, and then we'd have a late frost, and it would,
Yeah. Oh,
it
yeah.
would just nip that in the bud, literally. So getting the fruit to begin with is often a challenge, in your
Oh, yeah.
industry, I'm sure.
Definitely, and so well, not so much grapes, but with like cider and, or excuse me, with apples and cherries, they require, rely on pollinators, and so you can have a bad pollination, or it's too, like, currently it's really hot and humid in during the pollination season in Michigan, so they're predicting to have not as good of a fruit set just based on bees being tired and not wanting to be out in the heat. So
Hmm.
grapes are lucky enough that they're relatively self-pollinating, so we don't really rely on pollinators, but humidity is causing other things like molds and mildews and rot and stuff, which we're actively trying to prevent right now with, sprays and whatnot. So,
And you say you rely on Mother Nature a lot. Do
Mhm.
you use the native yeasts and other microorganisms on the fruit, or do you say pasteurize or sanitize the product and use commercial fermenters instead?
Yeah. So I'll try not to go on my personal soapbox about this topic too much, but
Oh, come
yeah,
on.
no. So I guess in terms of, quality control, and what I'm trying to do in my job is to kind of make a fairly consistent product year to year and prevent the bad stuff, from coming in.
Hmm.
So I'm relying on commercial yeasts, to do my fermentations, but I'm not pasteurizing or using pasteurized grapes or, cider juice or whatever to make what I'm making. But kind of with that being said, there are some pretty interesting things coming out in the commercial side of things where they're selectively choosing non-Saccharomyces yeasts to help bring out different components in cider or wine,
Hmm.
different thiol characters or terpenes or whatever, but also using these same organisms to help outcompete the bad organisms that are coming in on grapes. So like Acetobacter or Pediococcus, things that are going to cause, all these things to turn to vinegar. Basically, we're using different species like Meschlicovia or Torulaspora, sort of sub B species to basically outcompete and keep the bad away, and and they, well, keeping the good stuff. And ultimately, when we add the Saccharomyces, or I've got a few buddies that use these competitive non-sacro yeast, and then just kind of quote unquote let the native take over from there. Um, that's, we're getting pretty solid positive results, good clean product. And so it's all very interesting, but also in my mind, if you ever have used a commercial yeast, those things have been so selective and bred that if you use it one time, it's probably lingering around in your cellar or your brew equipment or whatever. So, the
Hmm.
native, is it really native? I don't know, without being able to select, or culture and identify the species. Is it really the native out there, or is it some yeast that from, years ago that still lingered around on your equipment? So,
That's true.
oh, yeah, so
And
that's a
and you
short soapbox, I guess.
and you would think that the naturally occurring yeast, while it can do the job of fermentation, it might not be as adaptive or adapted, yet to do it as efficiently as, say, a commercial yeast. So, if you were to just leave the juice alone, so to speak, it might do the job eventually, uh,
Oh yeah,
but then again, you're a commercial operation. You're not.
yeah,
Number one, it's unpredictable, and number two, you ain't got the time to sit.
yeah, true. Yeah, I have deadlines, and people need wine at certain times of the year, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I've got, like, a few winemaking buddies that they just said, yeah, let the native go, and it petered out at 4% residual sugar. So I made it a sweet, Riesling or cider or whatever. And I know a good cider maker. He kind of did single apple varieties, all native, like barrel fermented stuff. And he said, where the yeast died is where I packaged it at, and most of them went dry, but they had a few that started off very high in sugar and they finished a little bit sweeter just because of what they were. So I mean, there
Right.
definitely is, there is some good positive things out there with using quote unquote the native or spontaneous fermentations, but I've also seen some absolutely horrific products out there that's like, you sure you're one legal in terms of calling this a cider, but sure it's not vinegar,
Oh.
or it's like, oh yeah, that Brett might be a little too bready for anyone, but
Mm.
yeah, it's all good.
We call this one Old Foot.
Yeah,
Shower drain.
yeah, yeah. My favorite thing to do on like when I give tours and stuff at the winery, it's like, how do you guys press the grapes? I'm like, well, I just start stomping with my feet and I don't stop until they're all squished, and then people are like, what? And it's like, oh no, we have commercial equipment that does all that for us. So
Brings an unfortunate YouTube clip up to mind, but we won't go there.
yeah, I know exactly which one he's talking about.
If I can get the goofy thoughts out of my head, do you use stabilizers at any point to make sure that anything that's still in there doesn't come back to bite you later on after packaging?
Yeah, I mean, our big thing is because we produce not only just for us, but for other wineries and breweries and cideries that are looking just to kind of have their own products or whatever. It's, we're very quality sort of focused and, making sure everything's stable. So we do use sulfites, and I personally highly recommend using that, even on the homebrew side. But occasionally we'll use sorbate, if something that has a lot of residual sugar, we'll add that just to kind of help prevent
Hmm.
re-fermentations. But we also have some other things that we use. I don't know if you've ever heard of Velcorin, but it's a commercial, basically sterilant that kills yeast. It's used in the juice industry and wine industry and a bunch of different industries. That's relatively expensive, but it basically sterilizes the product without causing any effects to humans. It basically breaks down to CO2 and a little negligible amounts of methanol. It's
Hmm.
highly rated. It's been around since the 80s, so it's a pretty interesting product. But on the homebrew side, you'll never be able to actually get it, just because it requires really expensive, like precise dosing equipment. So
Dang, it's hot outside. But our sponsors, Ricky and Kelly from Groenfell and Havoc Meaderies in Vermont, have a new experimental brew to help you cool off. They're honey spritzers. These expertly crafted honey beverages are sort of the marriage of a craft mead and a fruit-forward seltzer. There's cranberry lime honey spritzer and cranberry apple honey spritzer. And if you hurry now to groenfell.com, you can get your hands on some twin packs as well as full boxes. 4.2% ABV, only 120 calories per can, all natural ingredients: water, honey, cranberry juice, and either lime juice or apple juice. Groenfell and Havoc craft meads and honey beverages are already refreshing and deliciously drinkable, but these honey spritzers are even better suited for life on the lake or after hiking or just grabbing some much-needed shade. Check out new cranberry lime and cranberry apple honey spritzers at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's Groennfell. A common thing amongst homebrewers, at least around in this area, in talking to Steve Wilkes, former homebrew shop owner,
uh-huh.
a lot of people make what they call country wines with local fruits and such.
Mm-hmm.
And common practice is to use a lot of sugar as an adjunct in these country wines. And some, I would imagine some, even commercial cider makers use sugars in their products as well. Where do you stand on adjuncts?
I mean, for me, I mean, when we make, cherry wine, we're trying to say it's at 10% alcohol. We bring cherries in at 14, percent sugar or bricks. That's going to maybe yield a 7.5% products, which we will actually use that for for our cherry ciders, but we'll chaptalize up to, 20 bricks, 22 bricks. And then we'll back sweeten as well. Like I don't have an issue with that. If you're really trying to because it kind of comes down to like your winemaking philosophy or what you're trying to do. And if you want to be, all natural or kind of just show the fruit as it is, then don't use sugar. But if you want something that's sweeter in the end, use sugar and stabilize it. I don't have an issue with that. So.
Mm-hmm. As long as you can maintain the character of the fruit, I would imagine.
True. Yeah. I mean, I've had some people bring me some very sweet things and like, oh, this is so great. I'm like, it tastes just like sugar water, I guess where you're making like meat or something like that, where you bag sweeten so much with table sugar because maybe you're cheap or whatever. I don't know. But if you lose, that essence that you're trying to go for, is it really a good product? I don't know. It's debatable, but yeah, to me, it's if you're going to spend money on good honey or fruit or malts or whatever, they try and show it off and let it speak for itself.
I've had some mass-produced commercial ciders that were, basically headache in a glass for me. But I'm assuming there's a ton of sugar in those things.
Oh yeah.
There's not much apple character, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I guess in terms of a business aspects, always know that sugar sells. So the sweeter the product is, it's probably your most famous products. Our number one seller is a peach and honey wine. It's ungodly sweet, but I spent all these tiring hours making, the best Cabernet Sauvignon or whatever, and spend years aging it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's great, but I'm going to take a case of the peach and honey and I'll maybe one bottle of the Cabernet. I'm like, oh, come on. So, you really try and sell the product, all that sort of stuff. And they're just like, yeah, I like the sweet stuff. All right, whatever. Especially in the Midwest, it seems, it's just sugar sells and it's all good.
But then they're paying your paycheck essentially, and they're enabling you to do the higher end stuff.
Yeah, no, we have a saying around here: the swill pays the bills. So. Like that, they have it posted in the back office somewhere. I'm pretty sure, at least used to. So
that's not on the label, I'd assume.
No.
Well, I have a feeling that even what you're calling, quote unquote, swill is pretty good. I have a feeling.
Oh yeah, I mean, it tastes like peaches. It tastes like honey. It's good. It's a solid quality product, and I don't like. Yeah, for me, I'm personally I prefer drier acidic products. So when I tell people like, oh, what do you like? I like this wine. Like, do you drink that? I'm like, well, no, but it doesn't mean it's not a bad product. It was designed to be sweet and fruity, and that's what it was designed for, and it sells. And there's nothing wrong with people who like drinking really sweet products. Like it's, as long as it's good quality and has no flaws, and buy it, drink it, and support it. So
yeah. There's a winery in central Arkansas that makes muscadine wines, both red and white, and it's pretty sweet, but man, it sure tastes like those muscadine grapes. It's if you like the taste of muscadines, that's what you get. And once a year I'll have half a glass of that and really enjoy it. So it's all in what floats your boat, so to speak.
Yeah, we make a ice wine typically every year. If we get the grapes to freeze on the vine, and that's like a really high quality product and really expensive to produce and make, and very finicky. And I mean, I'll have a glass here or there as like dessert, but typically if I'm gonna have a couple glasses, it's gonna be something drier, obviously, because I can't handle the sugar like I used to. So
I hear you. Well, the reason that we're getting together, and I'm really happy that you got in touch with me, is that you took part in a cider and perry competition recently, the Great Lakes International Cider and Perry Competition, or GLINTCAP, and you were really were interested in the whole process and excited about that whole process and wanted to share. So tell us about your experience being a judge with this GLINTCAP competition.
Yeah, so it's a competition that's, I think, approaching maybe 20 years, I think they said at the judging, in terms of doing this. But it's an international competition held in Grand Rapids, Michigan every year, put on by I think it's a Glen Cap Association or something. But yeah, obviously Michigan being a huge apple state, there's also a bunch of others. They kind of really focused on just a competition just on ciders and perries, and dwelling even deeper than just sweet dry ciders, but really focusing on cider nuts and kind of exactly what they drink and understand to drink in those multitude of categories and all that sort of jazz. And the reason I kind of joined is obviously we make hard cider, but one, they were looking for judges one year and they reached out to the wine industry in Michigan for extra judges. And then I just signed up and, like drinking hard cider, I felt I had an idea of, how to judge it, all that jazz. But then when I get there, it just was like a super like mind opening experience. I just thought people were buying apple juice or apple cider, fermenting it and doing all these weird different things. But it really like broke down to like more finicky, like winemaking aspects and using certain varietals and different types of apples I've never even heard of to really produce these high-end quality products and experience ciders from England, France, Spain, Canada, all across the the entire country of the United States. And just seeing what people were doing, it was super eye-opening, and I think deepened my love and appreciation for hard cider. So
wow, what was the most surprising thing out of the whole thing?
To be honest, I don't even know. I think really for me though is it's both a commercial and a non-commercial competition. There's guys that have been doing that both on the homebrew side and also the professional side, judging this competition and submitting different things. And there are basically I just was through tasting all this different stuff is that people who are making some pretty high quality ciders on like the home side, on the homebrew side, and searching out for like the local apples or the super old, varietals, heirloom varieties and stuff like that are making really high quality ciders, and then really kind of putting up a 1-2 punch with the commercial side as well. So it's pretty interesting to see that, if your people are into cider, they're into it and making really high quality stuff.
So what categories did you judge?
I ended, so I've pretty much done everything. I guess, well, I've done modern dries, modern sweets, traditional ciders, dry and sweet, fruited ciders, botanical ciders, wood aged ciders, like pommos and like fortified ciders, heritage ciders, and it's all sort of different, and modern is kind of, I guess, in terms of that category, is more of the, I guess, just using like a culinary apples or base juice, like apple cider that you can get at your local orchards, and producing, just fermenting that to a certain sweetness level, where traditional is using, heirloom varieties such as, Ashmead's kernel and Dabinets and all, what else? Golden Russet, all these different American varieties that exist or almost disappeared for the longest time just because there's too acidic or too tannic or whatever, and we're making good, edible fruit,
right?
Off the trees, or were good for baking or whatever. They kind of almost disappeared, but they're coming back now because people are doing cider. Then there's heritage, which is using the funk a little bit, more of the traditional European style of things, where English or French ciders have that more like a pretty solid like Brettanomyces character, bringing out the barnyard and the funk, and that's stylistically correct. And for me, it was kind of a weird judging experience this past year as I judged non-commercial heritage ciders, and I tasted this French-inspired one. It was sweeter. That was like obviously had bread. I was like, oh god, this smells like a barnyard, all that sort of jazz. And then I marked it relatively low, but I told the judges, like, I'm not comfortable in this category because I've never really had a whole bunch of French ciders or whatnot. And they're like, this one is a gold. It has perfect amount of breads, can taste apples. I'm like, okay, I'll change my score real quick and judge it a little bit better. But and then like Spanish ciders, they're known because it's so hot or whatever, they're pretty susceptible to, acetic acid infections and turning into vinegar.
Hmm.
And there's a certain point or a level of like where that's, that stylistically is correct, but at one point is it too much or too little or whatnot. So that's been, no, I guess that was also not very eye-opening experience as well, stretching that category. So
Yeah. Yeah, I would be afraid that, I think I'm pretty good, with coming up with flavor descriptors on the beer side. But I would be afraid that if I were to judge a cider competition or a cider category, that I'm afraid that all I would come out with is, yeah, it tastes like apples.
yeah,
My palate's just not refined in that direction. Are there flavor descriptors? What are the most common flavor descriptors that you look for or find in a cider to kind of, fine tune that tastes like apple description? You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah. I mean, in terms of like, using hops or beer, hops and beer wine varieties where you have those different sort of, very identifiable characters, apples are actually a little bit harder to judge because, is it, you're not going to get, let's say, oh, this apple tastes like raspberries or whatever. It's no, it's there is definitely like an apple characteristic. It's more of identifying, is there like a flaw? Is the
Mm,
cider in balance?
mm,
It's like in like the modern dry. It's you're looking for an apple character. Is the balance correct? Is there acid? Is there tannins? If there's Brettanomyces or Cetobacter, that's a flaw, and that's to get marked down. So it's kind of really looking for that. The big thing is like overuse of sulfites or overuse of sorbate in the cider that gives a off aroma. It doesn't smell um, different. Is there phenolic characters? Is it estery? Is it more the fermentation side or the fruit side that you're smelling? Then really the big thing in the category, especially when it came to like the fruited ciders, was, are the apples lost?
mm,
Could this beverage been made with a different base material, wine or malts or whatever, and still be the same? That was the big harp, and not really the harp, but the big point of the composition. It was like, are the apples the dominant thing in the what you're tasting? So that's the whole point, and that's how I judge for sure, was to make sure that you can taste the apples.
Yeah, when
You
you
know,
when you hear people taste wine, you hear all kinds of different flavor descriptors. All kinds of different foods and
Mhm.
chemicals and
Oh yeah,
plants and you name it. So the cider is sort of more simple in its color or its flavor palette.
yeah, I would say that it's, I guess, more simple but also more complex. So kind of, I don't know, catch 22 in it or something here, but it's you can typically kind of, at least other people better than maybe drink a lot more cider than me can probably identify varieties, but maybe because they show up a little more floral character or a little bit
Mm,
more, um, you know, apple flesh or whatever. Like I just made a single varietal Jonathan cider that I wrote the description for. Is like, well, I taste apple flesh, or like that sort of like we like a not like a mealy apple, but like a more softer apple. It tastes like the appley, fleshy palate character, or like, oh, it has more like a apple skin character, like a
mm.
dark, thick red apple skin character.
Almost a tannic
Um,
kind of a thing.
yeah, yeah, and that's another thing, was also like when it came towards like the balance or like the mouthfeel. That was like, I guess, the biggest amount of points that you could get judged on was, is there a balance between the acid and the sweetness and the tannins? I didn't realize apples were so tannic in terms of what they are like in wine, especially with red grapes. There's a lot of tannins. It's really grippy and kind of like rough on your tongue. But for me, I guess when the first year I did it was being able to identify like an apple tannin. Was it grippy or was it acidic? Being able to identify that difference. And when it comes to like making the stuff, it's you want a little bit more tan, a little less acid, but you don't want it to be too sweet. You want to kind of not be cloying or heavy on the palate. So yeah, I don't know, it's interesting.
Let's take a quick break to talk about our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. I'm running a little low already on the beer that I made with the new hybrid from Imperial I-22 Capri. It's a true genetic hybrid between Imperial's Juice and Loki, so an English yeast and a Kvike. You might recall Dr. Matt Winans talked a couple episodes ago about how they were able to achieve this in their lab at Imperial. I love the beer that I brewed with it, and I'm looking forward to trying the mead that Steve made with his packet of I-22 Capri. It's just the latest chapter on the innovations coming from Imperial Organic Yeast, and from what I hear, there are more coming down the way. With 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package, I like to say my stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches. And if I pitch in the early afternoon, my airlocks are usually bubbling before bedtime. Pair that with top-notch technical and customer support, and you have a brewing partner that you can rely on. Ask your local homebrew store about Imperial Organic Yeast and check them out at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. I would imagine that, most apples that we get in the grocery store, if they taste like anything anymore, they're gonna taste mostly sweet. And it would seem to me that if you were to make a cider out of your typical Walmart grocery store commercial apple, that it would be quote unquote flabby, to use a wine word, and that I'm assuming that the apple varieties that are most suited for cider making would be more tart and more tannic and have more of a sort of bite to counterbalance that sweetness.
Yeah, like I guess the big thing, and I guess the joke of the cider is, Honeycrisp doesn't make a good hard cider because it's pretty much just pure sugar, really little bit of acid. You basically ferment it and just have like an alcohol beverage. That's the kind of the running joke. So
it's good for
there
seltzers.
are some, yeah, exactly. That's the way you use it. Yeah, I mean, there's I guess on the big side, commercial side, people are just kind of using commodity apples, kind of what's available to produce, like flavored ciders or fruited ciders, all that sort of stuff. But there are I guess at least in the grocery stores up here, there are some apples that I think people are used to seeing there, like Macintosh or Northern Spies or Jonathan's or I don't know. Yeah, because I'm the big three in my head right now, but those actually have good I guess what you would use to bake with, where they have some acid, where they have because you're gonna use so much sugar to make the apple pie, right? When they have that acid to help balance it out, those type of apples can make a pretty solid cider. That's kind of where they would fit more that modern cider category area, just because they're, maybe not super traditional heirloomy and phenolic or super tannic, whatever, but they can make a pretty solid, cider with a decent amount, a little bit of tannins, but a decent amount of acid as well. And I know our base product that we use here for our higher end, I guess, cider range is that it's a blend of Macintosh, Jonathan's, Spies, and wine saps, which are grown in plethora right now, and there's other varieties out there too that are now being replanted for cider making. Even when it comes towards, I guess, the classification of apples, in terms of hard cider, there's things called bittersweets, or bittersweet, bitter sharps, sharp or sweet apples. I know that's kind of is a play on, that have a lot of acid, a lot of tannin, or low in tannin, high in acid, kind of how they're classified. So,
just curious, do you ever see any Arkansas black apples?
Not up here, but I have had a few ciders that I have used Arkansas black in their blend, and I think one year there was a non-commercial that was 100% Arkansas black, but I don't think I was able to taste it. So,
just curious, just because I'm an Arkansas boy, and apparently that was at one point a popular apple. I understand it's hard as a rock. Maybe in my memory, that's one descriptor. It was very, very hard apple, and very dark flesh, as you could imagine from the.
Yeah, well, I think I've seen pictures of it. They're purplish black in color. I I don't know if like the center has red issues or not either, but those apples do exist, but I've never personally had them. So I know there's some grapes out there that have red centers as well. So, um,
So do you see a lot of variability in the color and the tint of these ciders?
yeah. So I guess in terms of at least on the commercial side, with apples, you're able to pick them and store them in a controlled atmosphere environment. So a lot of like the apples that people can buy at the grocery stores now were picked last fall and they're sitting, kind of sitting in these controlled atmospheres where, less oxygen, more carbon dioxide, nitrogen, whatever. Just that I can, or yeah, I control how they're aging or whatever. And what I've seen kind of, obviously the stuff that's fresh picked off the tree and pressed off into juice, it makes like the best cider, high, good acid, good balance, light color. But as you get later and later in the season, they start to get more, they go from like that pale straw color to more of that like deep golden color as well.
Hmm.
So I think it's a little bit of an oxidation effect, just that those pigments are reacting with oxygen to just turn to like more golden color. And I guess also different apples, especially in the heirloom side, are going to press off different. Some are going to be a little bit more gold when they press off versus that pale straw color. And I guess on the judging side, if it, to me, it was always eye catching if it was that pale straw to like that golden yellow color. And, you could kind of taste a little bit difference. Like that pale straw would be green or, more like green apple, crisper, cider, and that more golden is going to be a little more like phenolic estery,
Hmm.
more fermented sort of character, and maybe a little bit more like sweeter apple notes to it as well. Than what I would see some ciders that would get to me that'd be a little bit more like bronze, brown. It's like, yeah, this one's got some oxidation issues. It smells a little, you know, just off than, cooked fruit and not as, pleasant, I guess, in terms of aroma.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are some styles as well that are, aged in barrel or whatever that have that, have a little bit that darker color, but and they're still very well done. So.
Well, let's take it to now. First of all, the Glint Cap, the Great Lakes International Cider and Perry Competition, has a style guideline online, and they've divided it into three groups: standard, specialty, and intensified and distilled. And they list under standard styles: modern cider, heritage cider, traditional cider, natural cider, rosé cider, modern Perry, and traditional Perry. We may not even want to stray into Perry. I don't know. But what are the main differences between those? I mean, to me, heritage and traditional sound pretty similar.
Yeah. So I guess particularly between those two is the heritage cider category. It refers to traditional European styled ciders, so that those English styles, the French styles, and the Spanish styles. So they have a more of a tolerance for the funk. And again, I don't know too much about these. So I'm sure there's even a better way to phrase all these, but there are, using more the English, French, or Spanish varieties, and then have those sort of funk characteristics to them as well. Where Brettanomyces or a little bit of vinegar acetic acid character is wanted in those. And the traditional category refers to using traditional hard cider apples, heirloom varieties from the United States. I think it also kind of carries over using those same apples, but that's where it's more driven on the flavor of the apple character is wanted. And then the modern is using culinary apples or a blend of non-descriptive apples to make up just a solid apple hard cider. So.
Way back many years ago, there was a tendency if your beer got infected, you stuck it in the Belgian category. Back when people didn't know, back when people were a little less discerning. So if your cider gets infected, it's a heritage. Is that right?
Yeah, I think people have tried that, and it usually comes back to like bite them in the butt a little bit. It's like, no, you didn't do this right, and or like they'll stick in the traditional side, and or that's where I think kind of like where the native category has come up now is because people are like, oh, I'm using spontaneous fermentation. This is where get say, oh, I use spontaneous fermentation. Did you, or did you just kind of let it rot basically and just turn to vinegar on it? And a bit more of my soapbox, but yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that category would be maybe the trickiest to judge. If it's spontaneously fermented, maybe that's a good thing or not.
I mean, you could do it well, but you have to know what you're doing. That's what I just tell people. It's like you can do that, but I don't recommend it. If you don't, it's like people like always come to me like, oh, I'm thinking about making hard cider and I want to do it spontaneous fermentation. Don't do that. No sulfites? Nah, don't do that. So.
Well, I mean, you could get lucky. I mean, people have harvested, wild yeast and wild bugs and come out with, really interesting, fun and good, good products. And I've tried it, and I wasn't as lucky.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, Saccharomyces itself came from the wild. It just was selected, through modern scientific techniques to be used in beer making, whatever. I think it's only maybe 50, 60 years old technology. So it used to be, I mean, way back when all wine, cider, beer was spontaneously fermented,
Right.
So,
or like you say, they were when the beer was or cider was put into a previously used barrel that worked, then they kind of naturally selected for yeast and bugs that worked and produced good cider. There's the myth or the legend that people use the good beer stick, to stir to stir the chilled wort, and that Then of course there's the farmers that have the kveik rings hanging up with the bird poop on it. That it works well too.
Yeah.
So what's a rosé cider?
It's like a new category, newish, I guess, but yeah, just it's kind of, when rosé all day kind of craze happened a couple of years ago on the wine side, that brought back dry rosés to the marketplace. The cider companies also kind of did the same sort of thing on their end and making like these pinkish hued ciders, either from apple skins, red apples. So some red apple skins are using, different fruits or grape skins or whatever to kind of just get a pinkish color. And that's where you kind of get kind of more like that cran apple sort of characteristics, or, a little bit of red fruit on the nose. In sweet, dry, kind of doesn't matter. And I guess and when it comes, I guess, really that category, it's like, is it still apple? You still taste apple. And, I work with a client that does a rosé style cider, and just we use a little bit of red wine in it, and it produces a really more like a sort of oxidized pink orange color cider, real dry, but has, again, that sort of cran apple, when you drink cran apple juice, kind of has that on the nose, a little bit of like more floral fruity character, but still tastes like apples.
Ella from Tavor says there are some delicious selections available for you to pick up this month. Ella says they have some really good Drecker and Evil Twin sours, along with lots of other delicious things. Tavor is not a Beer of the Month club where someone picks beers for you. You sign up by going to Tavor.com. That's T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or downloading the Tavor app. You'll see new beers each day. And when you see something that you like, click on it and add it to your crate, and the beers will ship in a few days to save shipping as your crate fills up. It doesn't cost anything to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase anything. In fact, if I can ask you a favor, go to Tavor.com. That's T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or download the app, and when you sign up, enter the promo code Basic Brewing, that's all one word, and you'll get $10 off your first shipment of $25 or more. Again, it's free to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase. Sign up at Tavor.com or with the Tavor app and enter Basic Brewing as the promo code. The rosé cider sounds kind of like it's sneaking into the specialty styles categories, which are fruit cider, hopped cider, botanical cider, wood-aged specialty cider, and then specialty cider and perry and unlimited. Ooh, unlimited cider and perry. Is that just anything goes?
That's what unlimited is literally like. Yeah, this doesn't fit into any like. So this competition has very distinct style guidelines. Very much like I guess like if you're judging, the BJCP competition, it's very very distinct. So sometimes you could be drinking something that's really like you really really enjoy. It's really high quality made product, but it's just in the wrong category. So it kind of gets marked. It doesn't get like say like a gold or like best in show or whatever, but it gets this very solid silver. And it's just like, hey, we write on the sheets, hey, we think this would do better in this category. I think that's kind of where the rosé category was created. It's sort of like a living competition, between the judges and producers of evolving new categories and subsections of things, so people can, it's kind of hard to put a rosé cider against like a sweet cherry, blueberry, wild berry cider, and judge them together in the same flight or category. So people are kind of, I think, suggested that they create a rosé style where they can kind of just have these different ciders judged together, and be separate from the other specialty products out there.
That makes sense. So I'm assuming under the specialty styles, and you've touched on this earlier, but whether you're adding fruit or hops or botanicals or wood, you're still wanting it to taste like a cider and have the apple character be the dominant presence, right?
Correct. Yeah. At least definitely how I judge the categories. You don't want to lose that essence. The whole point is to be apples. And to be honest, like the fruited category is the largest category in the entire competition. The most entries are in that category. Just because everybody's doing cherry, blueberry, plums, this or that. Hops is kind of a new thing this year was botanicals, so using things like lavender or like gin botanicals or you kind of being a little more creative. I think it's easier to sell something that's like inspired by like a mojito or kind of whatever people have an idea for, and they just want to use the apple base as that. Especially on the commercial side, it's like I have all this cider I'm making. I can only sell so much of this very fancy dry cider, so I gotta figure out how else to sell this stuff or make other products that people want. Not everybody likes to just drink dry apple hard ciders. People they're looking for the wild berry pie or the Campari inspired or Campari soda inspired cider or whatever. So, but yeah, it's all pretty good. So I mean, I think I judged the best in class for botanicals on the commercial side, and we gave like I think it was like a gin inspired cider, like the best in show for that category.
Wow.
Because it it had cinnamon and all these different gin botanicals and a little bit of that what's the main thing, whatever, all these different botanicals, but it still tastes like apples, and the actual botanicals they used highlighted the apple in that product. So that's why we all chose that one per se for that category.
Juniper berry.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. It stumped me there for a second too.
Yeah.
When I think of cider and spices, of course, the first things that come to mind are, pie spice, cinnamon and maybe, cloves and nutmeg and things like that. More on the, not saying I like pumpkin pie spice stuff, but, leaning toward that direction. But the third and final category is ice cider, fortified cider, and spirits. So, there you're talking, higher alcohol. I'm assuming ice cider is, which we've made on Basic Brewing Video in the past. And I actually, at that time, contacted the TSA, or the responsible, governing body at that time, and he told me that it wasn't distillation. it was concentration and they didn't care about it. So, but
Hmm.
it's actually, if it's the same process I'm thinking of, you take a fermented cider, you freeze it, and then as it melts, the alcohol and some of the flavors are the first things that come out and leave most of the water behind, and so you're increasing
Hmm.
the alcohol volume. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to do iced cider. I know a lot of people what they'll do is they'll freeze the juice and allow like the sugars and stuff like that to, just kind of like concentrate it on like the juice side, and then
Mm.
they'll ferment that. So yeah, you're gonna get something up there and like the more like apple wine, technically like 10% alcohol, 12% alcohol. Um, I I remember in college when I studied distillation, we learned about Applejack, which is where you would freeze the fermented hard cider and then um, pop, drain off the alcohol and the apple
Yeah, that's
stuff.
what we
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Uh, I was told was illegal. That's because I think it was more based like on a health thing, just because way back when in like the 1700s or whenever they were trying to, it was just a form of like freeze distillation. And technically you can concentrate all like the methanol in the off the ferments and then go make yourself go blind. But I don't know its current status. I mean, if you're the
Well,
true
we
apple jacking is still a thing.
we only did it once, and legal disclaimer: do your own research. And
Yeah, true. I mean, Applejack is one of my you can buy commercial Applejack, but I think it's done more like the traditional distillation, or where
mm,
they can remove the methanol or whatever. So that might be the legal, how it gets around it. But it's one of my favorite, I guess, liquors out there to make cocktails with. So mhm.
well, I'm going to go through the details of all these categories offline, but I can see why you were your mind was opened, in being a part of this competition.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly just giant eye opening. I mean, it's just crazy to see what they're doing. And, I know 10 years ago when I was getting it sort of into this industry, people were planting, getting these old varieties, searching them out in like the woods and, defunct orchards and trying to bring back these, different varieties. And I've just had now the opportunity to taste all like a bunch of different, apple varieties, not even anywhere close to what's out there. And just the differences between them, and it's like being able to really taste like a Baldwin apple versus a Dabinet versus a Gold Rush in identifying the characteristics, or just some of the names are crazy, like Ashman's Kernel or Esopus Spitzenberg, all these crazy names. And it's just like that. It's like, coming from, I guess, the wine side, really, as a career, it's like, I have all these different wine grapes that are commercially grown and seed. And, we were just buying apple cider to ferment. And now it's like, well, now I want to maybe make my own blend, because it gives you so much,
Mm.
opportunity on like the creative side to really focus in on the blend that you want to make the best cider. As a winemaker, I think ferment everything separate, keep everything separate for the longest time, and then when you go to package, blend it all together. So being able to, like, I guess, ferment all these things separately now and kind of come back to make the best products. Some apples have more acid and more tannins. Some have a little, different characteristics. You can really fine tune it and just develop something that one that you like to drink, but also, on a commercial side, be able to produce like the best products. I entered a few products this past year in the competition, and all four products I entered medaled, which is great. But
Wow.
it's, I guess, but what's really nice is that I was able to get feedback into like why they were judged that way. It's like, oh, this one close to a gold, but we gave it a silver because it was had a little funk in the
Hmm.
background or whatever. So,
Wow.
I think at least on the career development side, it's a good combination to enter just so you get that feedback. And I know in a lot of wine competitions, you don't see the score sheets and you don't get that feedback, which isn't, beneficial, to me. So,
Well, where can we find you? Where can we find Fenn Valley Vineyards and online and in real
yeah.
life?
So in Fenn Valley, fennvalley.com is our website. We have a Facebook and an Instagram, I think, and all that sort of jazz. I don't deal with the social media, obviously. Um, we pretty much are. our big part of our business model is kind of just more local tunes. So we're distribution in Michigan and then in Chicago area as well, a little bit. Um, but the distribution isn't a huge part of our I guess our business model. So it's more kind of supporting local, and you'll have to almost come to Michigan to taste our products. But I think we're able to ship to half the states in the country. Unfortunately, not Arkansas, as I found out the other day. And typically, most southern states that had the longest, that probably still have dry counties and whatnot.
Yeah, half
they
of them.
they are they don't like to have alcohol coming in, so it's kind of hard to. We don't even try it. We want to try. I think we've tried, but it's like, yeah, no, we can't do that. Sorry. So,
Yeah, and I think the local wine lobby is might have a hand in that as well. I don't know.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I'm really glad that you got back in touch with me, and I'm really glad that you're doing so well. Since we talked about what did we talk about back in the day?
Good old beer cheese.
Beer cheese. That's right.
Yeah.
I was thinking beer bread. I was like, no, that's
Yeah.
not right.
I think in that interview I said I was going to make beer cheese again, and I've been almost like 8 years now since college, and I still haven't made it since my class. I've tried making mozzarella a few times, but I haven't gone to the full extent of repeating my experiments.
Well, Matt, this has been a lot of fun, and I hope that we can have an excuse to get back together again before another 8 years elapses.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess to all the listeners out there, if you can, go to your local orchards and get some cider and throw some yeast in it, or don't if you don't want to, and see what happens. And maybe ask for some specialty stuff pressed off and see if they'll do it, or really dwell into buying apples and press them yourself, which is not the funnest thing. So,
Well, excellent. Thanks, Matt.
yeah, thanks, James.
Well, thanks again to Matt. I've started to see some pictures of apples and other fruit on social media lately. There are some apple trees in the state park near my house, and there are apples on the trees, but they're looking pretty sad. It's been really hot and dry, but I'm hoping some rain later this week will help them fill out a bit. And I'd love to make another cider soon. They're lots of fun and delicious. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voice, and we'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.